Hey everyone, welcome back to Motorcycle.com, and this, the Yamaha R7. Controversial name, but no matter what you think of the name, this is the R7 we have today. Now, I've already ridden this bike at the racetrack during its first ride at Atlanta Motorsports Park, so be sure and go there and check out my review of that. For this test, we wanted to see how this bike performs on the street, because it does have mirrors, it does have a headlight, it has turn signals, the whole 9 yards to make it a street bike. So instead of just having my opinion about what this bike is like on the street, I brought along Ryan Adams with me to maybe get a more sensible idea of what this bike can do or can't do on the street. Regardless of what you think about the R7 name, what we have here with the current R7 is, I say, sort of the successor to the R6, because you just know an R9 is coming and we're going to have two bikes to fill the void that the R6 left behind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point of what we're doing here today is to ride the R7 on the street to see what it's like in the street environment. Like I said, we're on the track. I've ridden this bike on the track a couple of times now. So much fun. Super fun bike to ride in a racetrack environment. But it does have mirrors, it does have a headlight, license plate, turn signals, all of that jazz. So it's meant to be ridden on the street. And even when I first saw this bike on its intro with the clip-on handlebars below the triple clamp, that was right away was like, that's going to be fun on track, and it's probably going to be murder on the street. And so I've got my thoughts about how it is on the street. We brought Ryan along, or I brought Ryan along for this test to see.
Two up.
Yeah, no, let's not go too far. But we brought Ryan along here to see, am I being too critical of sport bikes on the street? Because if you don't already know, I'm not a huge fan of traditional sport bikes in a street environment. So before I get into my thoughts of the R7 on the street, Ryan, regale us with your beautiful dulcet tones and tell us what you think of the R7 on the street, because like you said, you haven't had as much time on this bike as I have.
Yeah, but what I have had a lot of time on it are like bikes like the MTS7, the Yamaha 10RA 700, which all share this motor, which is what makes this bike so cool. Like this motor, how punchy it is, how much torque you get out of it. And so having Yamaha sharing that across these different platforms is a really cool way to kind of dip into each segment, right? Honestly though, I'm with you as far as riding sport bikes on the street. It's really the ergos. It's not so much, it's the ergos and the way the chassis works. It's just so much more fun and in its environment on a racetrack. So as far as when I first jumped on this, after riding a naked bike around behind it, I wasn't stoked about it. We had to put the GoPro almost into my helmet to be able to see out over it with the way you have to sit on the bike. But after a little while out here in these tight roads, it starts to shine just the way I would think it does on a racetrack, because of that torque that you just, you kind of be a little lazy and tie your stuff and you just roll out of corners with that torque, and it's a ton of fun. In a twisty environment, it's a lot of fun. Around town, I'm not into it at all, because although they say it's more of a relaxed and not so hyper sport focused.
Like this guy here.
Yeah. That guy did look a little more crunched up than I felt on here.
He didn't look comfortable at all, did he? He did not look the least bit comfortable.
And maybe this is a little better than, your traditional sport bike, but it's still a sport bike ergonomics setup, and you're still hunched over, and, if you've not got that solid core like Troy does from all the CrossFit, you put a lot of weight on your wrists and your wrists get tired. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
So you'll be glad to know that during our photo passes with our comms and our helmets, I was telling Evans, and I was going back and forth, my wrists are starting to hurt on this bike, and maybe I'm just getting older. I love the chassis, I love the engine, but I hate that riding position with clip-on bars that are underneath the triple clamps. That just means you're in this crouch down position, which obviously is good for a racetrack, but this ain't the racetrack. Maybe I'm getting older, maybe I'm getting wiser, maybe I'm just more frail, I don't know, but I prefer to be sitting up a little bit more when I'm riding on the street. And this crouch down position with the bars down low is just not my cup of tea anymore. However, one of the reasons why the bike exists the way it does with the bars low like this is because Yamaha did their market research, and apparently their target audience is younger and more fit than I am, apparently.
And me.
They want, I'm you, I guess. And they wanted a bike with clip-ons and like a cool full-fared look, sport bike type of resemblance, you know, a usable R6, let's say. Usable as in where the engine power comes on, not necessarily where you put your hands on the bars. And in that regard, I think the R7 nails it. I mean, you've got a cool look, you've got a cool engine, you've got a bike you can learn on, whether you're a street rider looking for a sport bike to eventually move to a racetrack type setting, or if you are part of that target audience that Yamaha did their market research with, and you know, you're the one who said, I want a sport bike that's actually approachable for the average rider. This is it. For $9,000, this is such a good bike to learn on. I mean, the power hits nice and hard in the mid-range, but not overwhelmingly so. Yeah, as a learning platform, if you're starting off on the street, which obviously most of you are, and then moving to a track, like this is a motorcycle that can do both. You know, it's got that styling that apparently the younger crowd, the hip cool kids were looking for. But yeah, in the twisty stuff and the canyons, it's a cool bike. Like it flicks over nicely, everything's predictable, neutral handling, easy power to get on and use. You know, the brakes are strong, but not overwhelmingly so. You know, there is a little bit air of quality to the R7 that for $9,000, you know, you could forgive this thing for not having, but upside down forks, radial brakes. Yeah, it's a cool platform. And you were saying, Ryan, when you rode this thing here, like you were getting on the brakes and kind of trailing into a corner, and you can actually feel that suspension in the chassis kind of moving and adjusting and like pitching as it would when you're on the brakes and on the gas.
Yeah, and I mean, what was cool about it is that it does feel soft if you're not being very smooth with the bike, but if you're really smooth with your inputs and everything, as you're coming into, you know, trail braking into a corner, the bike kind of sets itself up and you can kind of feel that suspension. You get to the bottom of it as you're getting right into the middle and ready to accelerate out, and it's almost like you've got perfect points on the bike is letting you know exactly where you should be off the brakes and back on the gas, and you know you've got that contact patch with the rear tire. It's which was kind of cool, and again, another reason why I'm sure it's awesome on the racetrack, and I'd like to have it spin one day.
Whenever we go, you're always like, oh, I'm busy riding dirt bikes or something, you know, so that's on you, buddy. But anyway, yeah, all that is to say, terrible street bike for a guy like me who, you know, appreciates the finer things in life, like sitting upright. But, you know, if you do appreciate what this bike is, awesome learning platform. And it's really cool to see the middleweight twins category kind of getting this resurgence in life with, you know, you have the R7, you have the RS660 Aprilia. I don't know if you want to say the SV650 is also a resemblance of that resurgence of this category. It's just been there forever.
Yeah.
Z650 Kawasaki, Ninja 650 Kawasaki, like, you know, the class is not dead. If anything, it's coming back to life. If you haven't already, go check out my track review, my first ride review of the R7, held at Atlanta Motorsports Park. I get into much more detail there about the real nitty-gritty of this bike. You know, I talk about triple clamp offsets and the chassis and the specific changes to how they made it stiffer, stuff like that. If you really want that nitty-gritty stuff, we'll put a link or a link something somewhere over here. I don't know where, but look for that video. That's where I really get into it. This was more of just a street ride. How is this bike on the street? Around town on the freeways, not that.
I mean, it feels like a sport bike. But
Yeah.
if you're okay with sport bike ergonomics, this has it. It for sure has it.
Is 100% sport bike ergonomics. And if that's your jam, this is your jam. It's not our jam, but for what it is, we can appreciate it. If you feel like reading, which probably you don't because you're watching a video of us right now, but if you feel like reading, I'll kind of air these exact same things in the written form over at Motorcycle.com, so be sure to go there and check that out. But in a nutshell, that's the R7 on the street. So for Ryan, I'm Troy. Go to Mo, and we'll see you later.